Scotty, beam me up.
Oh. Smash.
Get over here. It is pointless to resist.
Okay, I'm gonna switch things up today, guys. Today on the Punk Rock Geek Den, we're talking to Michael Croland, author of Oy Oy Gevalt, Jews and Punk, Rock Hora, Adventures in Jew Punkland,
Oh shit!
and
Props.
Celtic Punk Superfan.
Yes. Well timed.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on, Mike. I'm pretty stoked. Glad you
My
came.
pleasure. Thank you for having me, guys.
Yeah. Thanks for doing it, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially with the intensive screening process that we have over here. The gauntlet.
You made the cut. Congratulations. You've made it to the temple.
You woke up there. But we'll start you off light, Mike. What got you interested in punk or punk rock?
I'm glad I listened to your last episode with Kenny F, where you guys were, not giving Green Day and Blink-182 a hard time, too much, because I, like a lot of people, had The Offspring and Green Day, and then a little later on Blank as my gateway drugs into punk rock. It was on the radio. It was accessible. I had some friends who played me Offspring at camp. I remember the first time I heard Green Day was at the roller rink in 6th grade.
Oh fuck!
When I come around and Basket Case. And for the longest time, I didn't know that was called punk. Was that alternative? Was that metal? I was in 6th grade. I didn't know. But I liked how it sounded. And, we could talk till the cows come home about, punk purists saying that isn't real punk, but like having that conversation. It's been had many, many times. The point is, I still like to listen to the old music of all three of those bands, and I still like most of what Offspring and Green Day have put out since, not all.
Yeah.
Forget it. We don't need to talk about it.
I think
it got me hooked.
Yeah. I think they were a gateway for a lot of us. Like all three of us, I think.
Pretty much all of us, yeah.
Yeah.
All of us here, anyway.
You bring up an interesting point, and I hadn't thought of it since, because the way you're talking about 6th grade roller rinks and Green Day, we're pretty close to the same age. And I remember the conversation growing up was that I never heard the word punk rock until I was probably 19 years old. It was alternative.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you say that now, because I never ever thought of that before. And now I just take it, of course it's punk.
Right. Well, now I know their backstory, and I've been to Gilman Street, and I can tell you this, that, and the other thing, so I know the history. But at the time in 6th grade, and then I remember, like, by that summer, my best friend said to me, "You still like Green Day? Green Day isn't cool anymore." So needless to say, that's not where I was coming from. Trying to be cool, I guess I'm in the right place if this is Punk Rock Geek, and trying to be cool was never my goal in all of this.
Yeah.
Fuck that.
Same.
I never had any chance, so why have that be something to aspire to? But that's what got me hooked, and I went to a few underground shows here and there in high school, but not too many. But when I was in college, I guess there's really two different directions that my punk journey forked in. First of all, I went to school in Pittsburgh, and Anti-Flag, which is a very political punk band, is from Pittsburgh. And I saw them a lot, and I almost interned. Used to bump into their drummer, Pat Fedek, around town all the time.
Nice guy.
Super nice guy. And Justin, too.
That's awesome.
See a bunch. Pat's great. Like, when I say around town, I'd see him at an anti-war rally, because they're the real deal. Like, they're not just stuff. They were in the streets.
They're doing it.
Testing. It's not just a song lyric to them. I'd bump into him at the supermarket, which was the second time that day I bumped into him, and he gave me this look like, All right, this is starting to get a little weird.
But
super nice guys. What's that?
We got to quit meeting this way.
Yeah. But I have nothing but great things to say about Anti-Flag. And then the other direction, which is kind of why we're here talking about this now, is I got into Celtic punk, bands like Flogging Molly and the Dropkick Murphys,
I got you
and a lot of other bands that I found out about later on, but initially just those two. And those over the last 20 years, Celtic punk bands, at least Pogues, who were in an earlier era.
Yeah.
And what I liked about Flogging Molly and the Dropkick Murphys, by the way, I gotta just spell that out quickly. Dropkick Murphys, at least back in the day, were a punk rock band with Celtic influence, focus, incorporating traditional instruments.
Yeah.
For the reverse, they were taking the traditional music and giving it punk energy and aesthetic, etc. I talk about in the book how I interviewed Bridget Reagan, their fiddle player, back in 2002 for my college newspaper, and she was very adamant. She's not a punk rocker. She was very adamant. We are not a punk band.
Yeah.
They were touring on work with Anti-Flag and other punk bands. They have a punk edge, which I think they would take as a compliment, and they're glad to be part of that world. But they're not punk rockers per se.
No.
And I lump together. Look, it's called Celtic Punk Superfan. It's about those two bands and a lot of other similar bands, but they're not the same thing.
Right.
And what I liked about those bands was it was punk I was already a fan of, but there was something extra. There was a culture being made. It felt like I'm sure we're gonna get into this soon. I'm Jewish, I'm not Irish. I could joke all I want about maybe I was Irish in a past life, or everybody's Irish on St. Patrick's Day and I just keep it going year round, but like Irish. But it felt like the Irish kids had an extra connection. They knew a lot of the songs that were being covered, like the Rocky Road to Dublin and Fields of Athenry and the Wild Rover and Irish Rover. And I didn't know those songs. I learned them through those bands, but I didn't know those songs going in. And it felt like it was a way to relate to your ethnic identity with pride, and a cultural expression of this is our cultural idioms, our folk music, our folk instruments, and we're going to put our own stamp on it. I mean, I remember it was probably the first time I saw Dropkick Murphys live around 2001. They were at Irish Festival, which was not a punk festival by any means. And I remember I talked to Ken Casey, when he was just walking around there, a singer and bass player and founder. And he said from the stage, "We are the future of Irish music." And at the time, it was laughable. Like,
right.
Cool, they were headlining an Irish festival and it was fun, but like they weren't the future of Irish music. They were having a moment, maybe. But I think over time there's been validity to that. That is, they've had, first of all, endurance and sticking power. They've been around since '96, so hey, they've been around. Second of all, they've had an impact. If you think of to Boston, which was a movie, The Departed, which is like the bars around St. Patrick's Day. You hear it at ball games. That album went gold. They've had a lot of sticking power. They've had a lot of impact. They have maybe not been the future in any kind of like singular sense, but they have been what Irish music is to a new generation of people, Irish and not. And there's, which in 2001 I would not have seen coming.
You make an interesting point. That's a lot like Irish people. Like they just, this is going to sound really crass, but they're like bunnies. They just spread, right?
And am I correct to assume, Mr. McKeever, that you might be a little Irish?
Absolutely, 100%.
I had a feeling.
We all are.
Nice.
A bit of a mix, but I mean, I've got the letter, so that's
you've got the label exactly.
My ancestry tells Good.
Well said. So I mean, I could go chronologically, which came out a couple weeks ago at the end, but you know what I loved about that music, the Celtic punk music, was this extra cultural statement that it had. And I would see the Irish kids who knew the songs, who were rocking out in their own way, and I would later see this like at Gogol Bordello shows. There were old Ukrainian or former Soviet Union country who like got into it just a little bit more. And I kind of was like, wouldn't it be cool if there were a Jewish punk band and I could rock out? At the time, I didn't joke, but I didn't think that that was a thing around, 2002. A couple years later, I find out, first of all, that there's a band called Yidcore. Yid is in Yiddish or Jew. Melbourne, Australia, of all places, far, far away. And they do traditional Jewish songs, religious and just songs that they, play the shofar, which is a ram's horn that's used in religious context, on top of punk rock in some songs. That they, in 2005, put out a full album covering the full score of Fiddler on the Roof, which is like, you want to talk about cultural statements reflect a group of people. Fiddler on the Roof is, it's a fictional work, representative in a fictional, glamorized, dramatized way of the Jewish experience. And that blew me away. And in 2005, I pitched a review of that one album to of New Voices, the National Jewish Student magazine. I'd like to cover this. And she wrote back and said, that's really interesting, but is there a larger for Jews and punk? If so, and I was active with my school paper in college. I was, I never worked full-time in journalism, but as a journalist, I thought, cool opportunity. Let me research this. I don't know. And the answer was yes. Enough so that I wrote this feature article, which talked about several different categories. One, a few bands like Yidcore, and then I would find a lot more as the years went by. Punk rock bands that put their Jewish identity front and center, analogous to Dropkick Murphys, a punk rock band putting their Irish identity front and center. Yeah. Bands that were Jewish folk bands or klezmer, is a genre of music that were doing it with a punk edge or punk aesthetic, punk influence, etc. While not being punk rock per se, along the lines or the Tossers, Irish punk bands, and also prominent punk rock bands that included Jewish members. So the Ramones, two of the original four were Jewish, Mick Jones of The Clash, Malcolm McLaren, who was the manager of the Sex Pistols, two members of Bad Religion, of course, where, the Brews, one Jewish punk anthem, and NoFX have talked about their Jewish identity more prominently and overtly and humorously than any other punk rock band, period, or any prominent punk. Title of that original article in 2005 was Oy Oy Gevalt, and that wound up being in 2016, many years later, the title. And frankly, what was so cool about this is the kind of that breakdown of different categories that I used in that very first article way back in 2005 that I only stumbled into because an editor said there might be something more than just this one album, wound up being pretty much the framework used for a book published by an academic publisher 11 years later. So it led, and, sticking with, as the years went by, I kept bands. I kept getting more involved in this Jewish punk world. It became more a scene because nobody was making it into a cohesive. It was connecting into scene, but there were a lot of like-minded bands across the US, across different parts of the world. I mentioned Australia, that had a very similar idea. Formed in New York called Moshiach Oy, Messiah in Hebrew. So this was a band that didn't just want the Messiah, they wanted it now, like with hardcore energy. We want Moshiach Oy. This is their cover. And you could say that's an absurd concept until you interview them and realize this guy's totally genuine. He's really trying to bring about the Messiah by screaming "Oi" at the top of his lungs, and you know, all the power to him. And you know, I'm sure different people will disagree about, you know, depending on their religious beliefs about whether the Messiah has come or if that even makes sense as a concept, if you're an atheist, an agnostic, whatever. But like, hey, if you tell me that you're going to scream "Oi" to some hardcore and that's going to help bring about the Messiah and solve a lot of our problems, I wish you well, you know? Yeah.
Well, to me. While you're on the subject, because it's been out for a while now, I mean, I imagine it was well on the punk rock side, but was that both the article and the book received by other Jewish punk fans or even other Jewish people?
Actually, a lot of the media for the book was in the Jewish press. It was marketed. Look, it's a Jewish book and a punk book. It is both. Yeah. But it was largely marketed as an expression of contemporary Jewish identity, of the old being followed in terms of, you know, numbers of people as much as they used to be. The, let's say, you know, the movements of Judaism, the cultural organizations, the religious organizations. And sometimes people say, uh-oh, if synagogue membership is down, that must mean that, you know, younger Jews aren't connecting with their identity and Judaism's going to die out. The book, besides just talking, no, it's not dying out. It's people who don't fit inside the box do things their own way, DIY, and they're connecting to Judaism, both religious and in their own personally meaningful ways. And I also talk about some zines and books and films that also have that Jewish punk spirit, and even two rabbis who have a punk rock spirit I talk about in the last chapter of the book. And it's a way of saying, no, I'm still, there's a quote that I used in pretty much every presentation I did back when I was doing a lot of presentations about this. I'm a little, and it was said by a woman, Alicia Jo Rabins, who was in the band Golem, which I was including at my wedding, punk band. And her line was, yes, I have a lip ring and green hair, and I'm also going to fast on Yom Kippur, and I'm not going to deny either of those things, which I loved, because because you have green hair doesn't mean that you're not going to, let's say, fast on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, and atone for your sins. Like, God or not, or do whatever you do and put Judaism one way, and that's okay. And I'm sure a rabbi would come at it from a different perspective, that these, well, I'm talking with a broad brush here. These are the rules, they should be followed. But that's not a punk way of doing things. And suffice it to say, it's not just a handful of bands. There's a lot bigger picture, not just in the Jewish punk world, but in general in the Jewish community, of putting new spins on things and doing it in a way that's personally meaningful. So that was, maybe it's a marketing hook, but that was truth to that. And I think that's what made the book so meaningful for me too, that it was making that statement. Yeah, I like the music and I've seen these bands a ton of times. I genuinely love it, but there was something more here, you know, and that's what I was going for. And that's why fairly good attention in the Jewish coverage I got.
Not that I have any experience of anything being ill-received. It depends. I don't, people are sensitive, not everybody, but here it's a different group of people at a different time, because I'm from Alberta, Canada, and certain things that there's no delicate way to handle it.
Right.
You either just keep your mouth shut or you say it and cover up.
Yeah.
And I mean, both music and religion or spirituality or just being who you are, that's a real heavy thing to go at. That's not politics. That's not just music. You're going right to, in some cases, you're going right to somebody's core and you're saying, this is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I got to tell you, off the top of my head, I'm not trying to lie. Maybe it's just forgetting because the first book came out in 2016. Remembering any terrible reactions. Did I have people who didn't get it, who weren't interested, who didn't care? Yeah, plenty of that. That I'll be frank about with you. But did I have anybody who really said, like, no, you can't do that? No, because I think if you're, if you're an Orthodox rabbi who says that rules should be followed a certain way, then this book is just so far outside your realm that, why bother refuting it? Like, it's just not in the same world. I think there is controversy in the book. Punk rock is, goes hand in hand with controversy. I look a lot at bands, including Jewish artists, who make light of the Holocaust, and that's unfortunately a common thing in punk. In the 70s, the swastika was common in punk imagery, but who had a large role in popularizing that? Malcolm McLaren, who was Jewish, who was a provocateur and ran a fashion shop in London and was the manager of the Sex Pistols. And Sid Vicious is the one who you see wearing it, but who was the one pulling the strings behind him? Malcolm McLaren. So I talk about it in the book. It's complicated, like, the swastika use in punk, especially back in the 70s, and to what extent it still continues. But it's as straightforward as just saying anti-Semites doing it bad. There's some of that. There's definitely some of that. Sure. But when a guy like Fat Mike is making Holocaust jokes that are totally tactless, and Malcolm McLaren is the one responsible for its use in punk fashion.
Yeah, and that I think that transcends Judaism into a lot of, and not even just cultural or racial, but ideological, political, social, right? Yeah. I don't want to say people are tribal, but people are tribal. And sometimes it could be the silliest thing, and sometimes it could be the very most important thing. And then the rest of us, or maybe not the rest of us, but some of us, me, at times can't see the forest for the trees, and you dig. I'm right. All this outside stuff, you can't write this book. You can't tell me what this music is. I get it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's interesting for me because, I always questioned the swastika in the 70s. So that puts a little bit of perspective to it, because I just always wondered why, you know what I mean? Like, from where we stand now to where we were then, you can see the change.
Sure. There are a lot of different reasons. I think it depends on the individual. I think sometimes it was meant to be provocative just for the sake of being provocative. Not a person actually believed in Nazi ideals, but it just wanted to piss people off. And that is, among some punks, a thing to do. Sometimes it was about nihilism and negating the meaning. Well, if, especially in England, which was so, had a rough time of it in World War II, and Germany was the reason why, was the enemy, to hold up that symbol. It's not even about Jews. It's about saying, well, here's our enemy. Here's what they did to us. And if we use it in this, frivolous way, it's going to take the meaning out of it. And, you could take your powerful symbol and we're going to turn it on its head. And that's a punk way of looking at things too. I'm not trying to justify it or that it's right, but the point is there are different ways of looking at it. I know a lot of people in the Jewish world are just, they dismiss it out of hand. It's bad. I don't want to know from it. There's no possible justification.
Well, the justification.
There are justifications that I don't agree with, I guess, is the best way of putting it. I think, this is this is maybe a tangent, but I think especially in our current political climate, you know, people tend to tune out the other side. I like to know what the other side is thinking. They're not thinking reason. You know,
you need more than one side to every argument.
Yeah, I'm pretty progressive. I like to go to the Fox News website sometimes because I want to know, why are people thinking the way they do? It isn't.
No.
So, right. You know, there's a reason. I just don't agree with it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that there isn't a reason, then it doesn't make sense to me. So you might as well try to figure out the reason.
Yeah.
And that, I think a lot of times that's what makes it tough, is if on any side of a conversation, if you aren't willing to take the steps and arrive at how they got to the decision of using an image or using a word or using anything, if you're not willing to take every step to get there, you're just going to dismiss it. And you're not going to learn anything from that experience. And you bring in up post-war Europe, that's 100% what that was, is everybody knew that's your boogeyman. If you really want to be anti-establishment in post-World War II Europe, you throw that Iron Eagle up, or you throw that swastika, or that red, big ceremonial, you know, that imagery, you'll get that reaction.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
For sure.
Even with people you agree with, like,
right.
That your first instinct is, what? Who's there? What, you know, am I playing Wolfenstein? This isn't right. And they're like, okay, maybe they're being provocative for the sake of being provocative.
Right.
Yeah. But it doesn't make it any easier to consume that image.
Yeah.
Sure.
Not to like relate it to it, but like Bad Religion did the same thing when they were coming up with their logo. They just wanted to piss people off.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
you know,
we all know it's a cross X'd out, and like that's gonna piss people off.
Yep.
Yeah, you know, I struggle with this one because I love Bad Religion.
Right.
I talk about them in the book, no doubt about it. I've seen them a bunch of times. I think that objectively, if you are somebody who is I was a religious studies minor in college, so I'm not just interested in Judaism. If you are somebody who is interested in faith and you objectively go and read a lot of their lyrics, I mean, Greg Graffin has a PhD in evolutionary biology and did his dissertation on, you know, how people kind of balance their belief in evolution, science, and their belief in religion, and, you know, how do you square that away? I think that they have some brilliant lyrics looking at faith. And if you genuinely look at your faith and question it because you're taking it sincerely, I have respect for that. I believe in God. I'm Jewish. I'm religious in my own way. That's what I believe. But, you know, if somebody punk rock, whatever, not punk rock, agnostic, atheist, whatever, if you genuinely struggle with issues, I respect the struggle. I really do. And I think Bad Religion has some great songs. Yeah, they have some songs and a logo and a name that are going to turn off some people right off the bat. But if you really look at some of their lyrics and you know, grapple with them, I think they're great songs, struggling with it. Including the song Sorrow, which is, you know, their most commercially successful song, which was written by who is Jewish. So, you know, sometimes I wish that they didn't have that name in that logo, but they came up with it when they were 15 years old and, you know, punk teenagers. So I talk about it in greater depth in the book, but you got to consider it in that context. That was their name. At what point would it have made sense for them to change their name when they've been around for 40 years now? Never.
Exactly.
So that's what they're coming from.
It's kind of become
past the name and the logo. What's that?
It's kind of become adorable now. I remember my first Bad Religion concert. My dad was pissed that I was going. And I wasn't religious in any way, but he was. He didn't like the idea that it was so intentionally disrespectful.
Yeah.
Now this is 94, 95, and you fast forward to today. Nobody even thinks of that. He doesn't, and he's actually religious now.
Interesting.
And he doesn't have the same opinion of it. And I mean, I discovered American Jesus very late, and I showed him the song, and he was right into it. But where I think it's different from any of the really symbolism that's kind of not, I don't want to say offensive to Jewish people, but what would elicit that negative reaction is a bit different in that this isn't the anti-Catholic sentiment of early Bad Religion isn't comparable to the Holocaust. It just isn't.
No. You're right. That is
there's nothing
a fair
comparable
point.
to the Holocaust at all. I'm just saying, like, Bad Religion did the exact same thing that
they
fans were doing.
It was a different provocative for the sake of provocative.
Yeah.
And they're not as encouraged to question. And I think that's where people would dig in against them. But I guess I didn't really see it happen, but it just fell apart where people were really negatively reacting to Bad Religion until they weren't.
Right. It just stopped one day.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of glad that the negative reaction to that imagery hasn't changed, but I'm glad.
No, it definitely hasn't, because I know if I wore my Crossbuster shirt at my mom's house, she'd chop my head off.
There was
that's where it's interesting. I love the band. I wouldn't wear that logo on a shirt. I just wouldn't.
I wear the shirt.
I'm the kind of guy who wants to walk around pissing people off.
I think that's
don't wear it at my mom's.
Right. Exactly. That works. That's your solution. I love the band. I wouldn't wear, their shirt with that logo, but
I wear it anywhere else, just not around my mom.
Nice.
My mom is the only person that really scares me on this planet. So
right.
I think it was offensive until like the late 90s when people saw Marilyn Manson for the first time. You know what I mean? Like,
and then they had a new boogeyman.
And it's like, oh, he's a member of the Church of Satan. All right, Bad Religion's not so bad.
I'm telling you to think. They're not saying any of this crazy shit.
Yeah, I know, right? Then you look at the Church of Satan and it's like, well, they actually got some pretty damn good ideas. But no, let's not go off on that tangent. But why don't we go ahead and take a quick break here, guys?
Absolutely.
Come back and get right back in
with the Church of Satan.
Yep. Yeah.
The look, the feel, the sound, so real.
The AK Centerfire, automatic water weapon, batteries not included, with up to 30 feet of firing power, an extra clip for reloading, a shoulder strap for moving out. There's also the M16 rifle, the sidekick pistol, the RPG rocket water launcher, the AK Centerfire.
The look, the feel, the sound, so real. Entertainment.
My Buddy and Kid Sister, each sold separately from Play School.
And we're back. And we cut you off just at the end of, you were telling us about Jewish punk, and I think we were just getting into the Celtic part of it. I hope that's where we were.
So,
that was ages ago.
Yeah, so the Jewish punk interest for me, as I was explaining at the beginning, came out of the Celtic punk interest, and I never lost that interest. So I was still, the book is called Celtic Punk Superfan, which is maybe, a cheesy hook for saying it, but I've been a big fan for a very long time now, and I've been writing about it. I mentioned I interviewed Bridget Reagan from Flogging Molly and wrote about it for my school paper back in 2002. So for 20 years now. And after doing the Jewish punk stuff and, just getting in the groove of writing about all this stuff, I thought, you know what, I have enough here for a chapbook, a short book where I want to do this. And, so one part of the book is just compiling the writing that I've already had going back to 2002. So it is the articles I wrote in college about Flogging Molly and the Dropkick Murphys. It is between 2006 and 2010, me wondering like, all right, so I'm not Irish, but why do I like this music so much? Is there a Jewish connection? Short answer, no, not really, but hey, you could fake it. There's good stuff in there in terms of, Celtic music and Jewish music is both made by people living in diaspora away from their homelands, yearning, talking a lot about yearning for their homelands, has the fiddle in an iconic status. And there are historically, in New York especially, when they were immigrant groups, let's say in the 19 teens, links in politics, in songwriting, between Jewish and Irish people working together as songwriters, Jews writing songs about Irish themes. There's a long history of this. So that's one chapter of the book. And then, when I was promoting the Jewish punk stuff, I always kept coming back to the Celtic punk stuff because it's like, all right, you've never heard of these Jewish punk bands, but like, it's analogous to Dropkick Murphys. It's analogous to the Pogues. As I was saying before, ethnic punk, which isn't really a term that people widely use. As far as I know, I coined the term back in 2005, but if somebody else wants to take credit for it, they might be right. Like Irish punk is, or Celtic, if you're including Real Mackenzies and Scottish punk, they're the one main exception to Irish here, is the gold standard of ethnic punk. I mentioned Gogol Bordello before. There's an awesome Tex-Mex punk band called Pinata Protest. There's a Cajun punk band called the Zyda Punks. There's a cool band called the Ukrainians. Like there's the whole Afro punk movement. There are different themes on religious, racial, cultural expression of punk, but really Celtic punk is the only one that's had major commercial success. Flogging Molly might say that they haven't been major commercial success, but like they've gotten by and have had a nice career over a long period of time. They're not, huge rock stars, but they've gotten by just great. And then also, I did a big feature last year about St. Patrick's Week, not just day, live streams during the era, which was a cool way of looking at, what are all these different bands from 3 different continents doing? Not just the Dropkick Murphys and Flogging Molly and Real Mackenzies, some of the bigger bands, but some bands that I hadn't seen before, like the Langers Ball, which is a folk punk duo that it was doing Pogues covers. There was a Irish Punk Festival, which was the coolest thing, and you can watch it on YouTube, and it's 5 bands from Latin America plus 1 from Spain by special invitation. Doing songs in Spanish, Portuguese, English, and it's Celtic punk and folk punk, and not just musically, but like they're even like wearing vests like some of the Celtic punk guys and wearing scally caps, and there was a lot of plaid, and it's like even in terms of attire, Celtic punk has developed these signatures musically, dress wise, and it's come a long way. It's not just about these 2 bands that I was into in college. They're still huge in the context of Celtic punk, but it is widespread in America. It's not widespread in Latin America. It's widespread in the world, including to Latin America.
Right.
To make that point, distinction. So when I was putting it all together, plus 1 poem that I wrote about Celtic punk a few years ago, because why not throw a poem there as an appendix? When I was throwing it all together, I thought, okay, this is a chapbook, a short book. I'm really proud of putting this all together. Nobody's ever done a book about Celtic punk before. Nobody's ever done a book about either the Dropkick Murphys or Flogging Molly. At my last job, I was an editor for books about music, and I tried all 3 angles, and Dropkick Murphys and Flogging Molly said no, and okay, so be it. I got no from a lot of other artists too. But nobody's ever done it before. I'm not in a position in terms of working full-time and having a family where I can take the time to research and do all the interviews for a full-length book from scratch. I would love to read that book. I would love for somebody else to write that book with a chapter on the Pogues, a chapter on Flogging Molly, a chapter on the Dropkick Murphys, the Tossers, the Real Mackenzies, the Mahones, and then talking about Latin American bands and other artists you might not have heard of and how far it's come. I would love to read a full-length book on that, but that wasn't something I was really practically able to do right now. So I thought, well, what would really make a statement here besides just putting my own writing together? And I did a lot of research in terms of online library research too. And I put together a preface and an introduction that I feel tied it all together and talked about what are the common themes in Celtic punk? What are the, yes, I'm not kidding you, scholarly articles that have been looking at the Dropkick Murphys and other bands for over a decade now? And yeah, this person said one thing, this person said one thing, but nobody's been connecting the dots. And I know that's a term I used before, but it's kind of what I'm a writer, I'm a researcher. I connect different far-flung dots and try to, you know, mold them into a cohesive narrative. And I found that, you know, certainly more than Jewish punk, Celtic punk is, and people are familiar with it, certainly in the punk community.
Yeah.
And, you know, I talk about in the introduction, and again, I'm not just making this up myself, I'm pulling from literature. What does authenticity mean in Celtic punk? What does it mean to be authentic? And this was pretty cool. There are some people would say that authentic means being authentic to traditional Irish music. So for example, if you're playing traditional Irish music as you'd hear at a session, like in a pub in Ireland, then that's authentic, which is true. I'm not going to deny that. Yeah. And therefore, by that standard, a band like the Dropkick Murphys are inauthentic because they're not playing it that way. They're not even playing it, the folk elements over punk rock that way. Yeah. But if authenticity is being true to yourself, and James and I just during the break were talking about Boston, even though neither of us live there, you know, if Boston is America's Irish city and the Dropkick Murphys are hailing their hometown that way, and I got the shirt when I, you know, shipped up to Boston for a hometown St. Patrick's Day weekend show in 2013, you know, which is like the definitive Dropkick Murphys fan experience. It's where all three of their live albums, or at least
it's on my bucket
recorded.
list.
What's that?
It's on my bucket list.
Oh, I'm glad I did it. It was great. And I saw them in an arena. The Dropkick Murphys headline TD Garden or whatever it was called.
Right.
Like it was St. Patrick's Day. It was amazing.
Insane.
And you know, it's where the Bruins and the Celtics play. And you know, they're being true to their own experience, which is, yeah, they're singing about the rocky road to Dublin and Ireland, but they're also singing about Boston. They're not denying that they're not from Ireland. They are being true to themselves. And I think in a punk sense, that's what authenticity is. You know, even in this book, I talked about, yeah, I'm coming from the Jewish punk background with the other books, but like one reason I decided to include those articles where I was talking about my realistic music as, you know what? I'm showing my true colors. I'm showing myself as being true to myself, authentic. I'm not saying I'm an Irish insider. I'm not saying that I grew up listening to Irish music or that I knew these songs beforehand, or even that I've become the leading expert in Celtic music. I'm not, but I am a huge fan and have been for a very long time. And here's where I'm approaching it. And to me, that's authentic. And, you know, I thought it was pretty cool that there was this scholarly literature trying to distinguish between those two different elements, you know, for a band like the Dropkick Murphys. I love that. So being able to connect the dots, to me, I was only going to do this book if I could do more than just compile my own writing, if I can make a statement. And when I finally finished the research and put the introduction together, if I can toot my own horn, I'm like, all right, I set out what I chose to do, what I tried to do. And that's why I'm glad to put this out there. It's a short book. It's not, you know, so you commented, James, but like somebody posted in Punk Rock Dads today that he was really enjoying it. He only wishes it were longer. Like, that's a fair statement. Again, I'd love to read that full-length book, but you know what? I'll take that as a compliment.
He wants to see more, for sure.
That's a compliment as far as I'm concerned.
It's like listening to a good record and it's like, man, I wish there were more songs.
Right.
You know,
so,
and then you find out there are more. It's just they're not out yet.
Exactly.
It's when somebody says, I wish that were shorter.
That's when you're like, hey.
That's right. So
that's awesome.
But yeah, you know, look, and I think another major difference between Jewish punk, like all these bands, I came to know them, not the prominent bands with Jewish members in Melbourne. They blew me off, which I could tell that story if you want, but it didn't.
Surprise.
Should I tell that story?
Hey, go ahead.
It's up to you if you want to.
Listen.
Go for it.
All right. You know what? For a long time, I didn't tell it when I was reading the Jewish punk books because it was like, bad mouth. But you know, so much time has passed. Like, I'm just going to tell the truth. So I had a cousin who was friendly with Eric Melvin's wife at the time, who put me in touch with Melvin, and NoFX were going to be playing. And I was emailing back and forth with Melvin outside the venue in front of their tour bus. And I was going to get to talk to Melvin and Fat Mike. And we had this idea, like, I don't need to talk to the biggest artists because, like, they're on the record saying everything that I need them to say already. If, you know, they're funny, I'm a fan, like, I'm not going to turn down this opportunity.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
I get there. Melvin never showed up. Hefe came off the bus at some point. We're talking like 1:30 in the afternoon. Eventually, their manager or whoever, some hired whatever, goes on the bus and brings out Fat Mike, who looks, maybe he just woke up, but if you follow Fat Mike enough, I'm pretty sure he wasn't just groggy from sleep.
Yeah.
So everyone, I don't know to be true.
We're not saying
anything, but
we're not saying anything that NoFX.
But he said it himself many times, so you know what? Listen to his parts. And
he looked disheveled. Let's just say that
he looked disheveled. Yeah, and he comes off the bus, and I'm trying to do this interview, and the only words he says to me are, "You're the Jewish guy, right?" And their manager is like, I got to get him to sound check. We're running late. We can't do this right now. Come back at 6:30. First of all, I email Melvin. I get no response. I follow up later. I get no response ever to this day. They went to SNL, I think. They weren't the featured artist or anything, but like they were hanging out backstage at SNL. I tried to get word in, you know, just standing outside the venue, like it never happened. So the book is no worse off without it, but I was a little disappointed just that I wasted my day trying to make it.
It would have been a pretty good grab for that, I think, but
it would have been a fun interview. That's what it would have been.
As we've learned doing this show, you win some, you lose some.
Yeah,
exactly. I cast a wide, aren't going to work out, and the ones that do work out, I'm grateful for. Usually that works out. But anyway, I got off on that tangent as a way of saying most of the Jewish punk bands, not the prominent ones, you know, I've met them, I've talked to them backstage, if there is a backstage, you know, I've hung out with them. I interviewed them at you know, in their houses, deli, a kosher deli, because that's where they wanted, sorry, a Jewish deli that wasn't kosher. Let me get my facts straight. A legendary, you know, at a coffee, like, you know, we just hung out and talked, kind of like you guys and I are doing now, just casually and, you know, as real people, not as rock stars. And Dropkick Murphys and Foggy Molly, I interviewed a couple members when I was in college, and I hung around after shows sometimes to talk to them, but I don't have any real relationship with them. You know,
up as well.
What's that?
That would have been like right before they kind of made it big.
You know, I would say the way I say it in the book is they were already in their prime, but they hadn't yet released their highest charted single. So in Oates, Drunken Lullabies, their second studio album, What's Left of the Flag had just gotten commercial radio play for the first time they'd ever had that, and they were getting the music video ready. They were a known entity, certainly, at that point. They were like about to hit it big. Like they were
just about to explode.
Hitting it big. Yeah. You know, 04 wrote that article and talked to Ken Casey and Tim Brennan from the band. And, you know, like they hadn't released I'm Shipping Up to Boston yet, which again, the album
would have been the Blackout days, I think.
Yeah, it was exactly. Blackout was 03 and this was 04. So they were promoting Blackout at that show, and they played 12 out of 14 songs from that album at that show. And like, again, they were pretty well known in the punk world at that point. Maybe they didn't have a song in The Departed and their biggest song yet, but like they were what they were the same band then that they were when they released Boston a couple years later.
Yeah, everybody.
It's the same concept.
Yeah, everybody knew the name in the punk scene already. They were just headed out to public. Yeah.
Right. So
that's when they blew up into outside of punk, like you mentioned that shipping up to Boston ended up so many places, and it did. And I'm just thinking of the places that I heard it in that was not a Dropkick Murphys concert, like Forrest Griffin's walk-in music, or some team's goal music, or their fight music. Forrester's getting a scrap on the ice, and you hear that song fires up, and you're like, oh, here we go. Let's do this.
You said earlier, like, you just know, oh, okay.
Yeah. And then it goes to the movie too.
Yep.
And as a longtime fan, I'll just come out and say it. I like that song. I like hearing it in those other contexts, because it's like, hey, it's a Dropkick Murphys song. Yeah. I like hearing it, on the live albums, and when I see them live, and when I listen to them, I do like it. I'm not saying anything negative about it, but it's not my favorite song. Like, it's not the hardest rocking song that gets.
Not by any means.
I'm talking about bands that are, different, in different spots on the scope of what is punk and to what extent punk is incorporated. But like, when I listen to Dropkick Murphys, I want that energy. When I was front row pressed up against the barricade at a show 2013, like that volume, that energy, that's what I associate with that band. Even, during the pandemic, watching their live streams,
the energy is there.
Not even from where I am now, just in here, my own one man. I want that rocking out energy. And every artist shouldn't have every song sound the same. And I'm not saying anything. It's not my as much.
I totally get that too. The thing about shipping up to Boston isn't that it's my favorite song. Is there's a comedian in Boston, his name is Bill Burr, and when he talks about that song, people from Boston, and I think that's hilarious.
Oh, that is hilarious.
He flipped right out about talking about it, and I thought, you're that upset about a song, you've heard this way too many times.
Dude, I'll give you some perspective, Matt. Somebody tells you they're a fan of the Dropkick Murphys, all right, and then you pull the 3 songs test, and then the first one they say,
I was just thinking that,
and then the first one they say is shipping up to Boston. You're like, nope, stop, just stop. You're not a Dropkick fan. You just like that song.
If the first time I guess jig, then you give them a high five.
Yeah, because that's just a fun fucking song.
Yeah.
That one's got the energy you're looking for.
I gotta tell you guys, it kind of fits with the vibe here. So about a year ago, Dropkick Murphys came branded Bagpipes.
That's cool.
And reason I've never bought Bagpipes is, well, there's a few reasons. One, they're really expensive. Two, I'm not going to take the time to learn.
Yeah.
And 3, they're really loud, and my wife has made it clear that she doesn't want me playing loud instruments. Took away our kid's xylophone because I was playing it too. And 4, Wright's background, which we haven't talked about, but whatever, that's a big part of who I am. Oftentimes materials, but there's an option for a non-animal pipe bag here, extra money. So it's like, I don't know, I think it was like $1,700, $1,800. And it's like, I'm not going to spend that money. I can't bring myself to spend that. Yet I can't get the idea out of my head of how cool would it be to buy them, not play them, and like frame them in a shadow box and display it as
something.
But
you can't justify spending that money.
Yeah, you just can't. But I love the idea.
That is a great idea. Somebody out there will do.
It's funny you mention that, because I was Christmas shopping, and there's a big mall here called, West Edmonton Mall, not cleverly named at all. There's a store in it called Celtic Geek, and they have bagpipes, and they have the leather bags and countless other things. But I'm on my way out the store, and you remember way back when people used to post, like physically post for tutoring services, music tutoring, anything, and you just rip the number off. They had one of those for bagpipe lessons at this store in 2021. And I thought, I might have to do that just because it's brilliant.
That is brilliant.
Yeah.
You know, if I could just read a paragraph from the book, I wasn't planning to, but it says it better than I could. You know, one reason I love the bagpipe. It says it better than the moment. While my passion for Irish music originated with flogging Molly, I owe my interest in bagpipes, kilts, and plaid to my alma mater, Carnegie Mellon University. The school, Scottish-born founder Andrew Carnegie, CMU in the world to offer a bachelor's degree in bagpipe performance.
Oh, damn.
Drums band side every Monday at 6 p.m., which I sorely missed after I graduated. Members of the marching band wore kilts and sporrans, which are the pouches that go in front of the kilt. Our school newspaper and sports teams were named after tartan plaid. When I saw these Scottish elements in Celtic punk bands, I connected with them because they were familiar. So that's not so much the Irish element, but yeah, the bagpipes there. That's part of why I can't get the idea out of my head that I want them as art, even though I don't want to spend money.
Wow. That's a cool history too. One of the first schools to offer a bachelor's in bagpipe performance.
Who knew?
Who knew? And quite honestly,
Pittsburgh of all places.
That's one of the most intense undergrad programs I've heard, I'm sure.
It was just another instrument. So like as you're getting into Celtic punk, like, okay, I'm hearing it every week outside on campus. This just feels normal to me now. This is my
I don't know how you guys celebrate, because in Canada we have a big day in November for remembering the war. And everybody that, I mean, not everybody, people I'm connected with. So my wife's family and my family, very Irish, very Scottish, connect heavily with the bagpipes, whether it's Canada or anything like that. It's the bagpipe and the Irish ethnic culture in Canada is in Western Canada at least, is a real big deal. And we're getting into now the shove of everything here: country music, folk music, rock and roll, Canadian music, and it's, I mean, Spirit of the West is a little bit of everything, and you can go into every other little, and find a song like that, whether it's a bagpipe. The Irish Rovers were a big deal. Everything's escaping me now that I have a point to make about it, so forgive me. But growing up, it was huge, and the waltzes were big.
Yeah. With
bagpipes here. Those were dances we learned in public school. It was such a big part of it here.
That was your square dancing.
Yep. Well, we learned that too.
Well, here it was just square dancing.
Mm-hmm.
If my 300-pound ass would have had to learn an Irish jig in 12th grade gym class.
Oh, I didn't know that. These are all partner dances.
I know, but either way, it would not have been good.
Jigging at all? Are you got an ACL replacement here? Get out of here.
I just can't lift my feet up that high anymore.
No, that's interesting. In terms of the Celtic with all these different types of music, but look, the Jewish punk, obviously I was relating to it as part of my Jewish identity, and that's why I kept digging deeper and deeper and deeper and relating it to so much. At the end of the day, what is it that I like so much about Celtic punk and Celtic? It sounds good. I could tell you this aspect and that aspect, and I appreciate all that. I do. And I know it's subjective. It sounds good. That's why I like it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's pretty much it for me. Because, I'm Irish, but it's like a minuscule amount, compared to, know what I mean? So it's like, I can't really claim it.
Yeah,
it's there, but I just like the sound of it. It just sounds great.
Yeah,
I like when music sounds good to me. I'm gonna keep listening to it.
Yep,
right.
No matter what it is.
I don't think there's a bit of Irish in me. I'm mostly like German and Romani, but I don't think there's any Irish in me, to be honest. But I just enjoy the music.
Okay, so we were talking about Gogol Bordello before. Do you connect to the Romani identity through them?
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep. Yeah, I've seen them twice. They are fun to see live.
They are a fun band.
I've seen them a couple of times too. Yeah, I'm not doing my next book on them, but I did meet Eugene once.
Yeah.
That was fun. So I mentioned my last job. I worked as an editor for Books About Music. The company went out of business. Hey, it was a fun ride while it lasted. And one I worked on was My Riot by Roger Moret of Agnostic Front, where Al Barr of Dropkick Murphys actually wrote one of the forwards, and I edited it. So I do have that small connection too. Awesome. But I didn't really interact with them directly very much. So you probably know my name if I'm being honest.
It's still pretty cool though.
But yeah, so there was one day where Roger was in New York and we were doing press together, and I was going around with him, you know, on this podcast and that interview and this and that. And there was one podcast interview we did where as he was leaving, Eugene Hoots from Gogol Bordello was the next guest, and they bumped into each other way down. And like, I enjoyed working with Roger, and he's, you know, a genuine guy, and I appreciated his story. It's a great story, but basically Gogol Bordello is much more my thing than the New York hardcore from the 80s. And, you know, I was kind of starstruck, but like I'm professional. I can't be like, you know, nice to Roger all day and then like, you know, fangirl or fan over Eugene here, and you know, asked to have Roger take my picture with him. Like, that's not so but, like, it was pretty cool. Like, you know, I don't think Eugene recognized Roger, but like as soon as he heard it, Eugene was like, you know, in his very thick accent, tell me, why am I the one to blame? Why am I going insane? Which is, you know, lyrics from Victim in Pain, one of the best known Agnostic Front songs. It was like, cool, like, you know,
it's a pretty cool moment.
Pretty bad.
Very different artists from the punk world, like, you know, having a, you know, this show of respect for each other. I thought it was awesome.
That's a punk rock experience.
It is.
That's something else, man.
And I was just like on the street in front of this random building, you know, and
damn,
happened to bump into him right before he got. I was hoping we would when I heard that he was next, but you know, what was it going to do? Stall forever? Again, come across as professional. So, but I did get my picture taken with Roger too. I don't want to say that I didn't, but it wasn't. You know, personally, I was more starstruck with Eugene.
Yeah.
It's funny. I mean, we've talked to a few people and how we experience that kind of starstruck.
Yeah,
I'm not an old hand by any stretch of the imagination, but I had the benefit of having interviewed Dennis Jaggard from 10 Foot Pole before.
Cool.
So when he came on, it felt like I was talking to a friend I've known.
It felt like I was on another planet because I've listened to those guys since I was like 13.
Yeah.
I was just like, all right, this is happening right now. This is cool.
But the first two times were exactly like that. He was great. I froze the first, and thank goodness that in the interview the record button wasn't pressed. We had to do it again. But I had a chance to, you know, get over it. But the first one, I could just listen to him speak. I'd look at my questions, I'd read it off mechanically, and then I want to hear his answer. It would have been absolutely miserable to watch that first one. And when the co-host or the guy who it's his show, he's like, hey, I didn't press record. It's like, yes, we get to talk to him again. Do over.
Nice.
Do we want to give a shout out to said host?
Richard Martin, founder of PRD.
Yes, sir. Our fearless leader.
That's so fun. He is a great dude to talk to.
He's a wonderful dude.
Yep.
Yeah.
He really
is. Since we've all been involved with punk rock dads, you know, I'll say, and for those listening who don't know, although if you've listened to this show before, you probably know, you know, it's a Facebook group that formed a couple years ago, and for me, I found it right around the time the pandemic started. And at the time we were doing these great polls about best punk album of all time, best punk song of all time. And I missed that stuff, but I'm guessing it has something to do with how busy the guy who was running it has been in his personal life, why it's on hold. So I begrudge him for that. But it was a lot of fun. And, it became this online community. And especially at a time early in the pandemic where it felt like, in-person community was lacking and still is, frankly. Unfortunately, it really became something special in a lot of different ways. And, there's a humor element to it. There's finding new music. There's just connecting as punk fans, connecting as dads. And it's been connecting in terms of even being invited on this show. Thank you very much. It's
there wouldn't be a show like this without it, in all honesty.
So it's like punk rock dads, like Richard Martin started something he wasn't planning on starting.
Exactly. He didn't know what
what was going to happen, and it blossomed into this pretty much. Like it.
3 versions later.
We're 3 iterations in.
And not for nothing. I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but I can say that at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of things personally and in real life happened, and I'm not unique in that regard.
And a lot of major things happened to me.
It hit a wall for me where I wasn't in a dangerous place, dark place, sure, but I wasn't, some other people got to the point where they maybe considered hurting themselves or things like that. But I was on my way there, and found a group of people where, okay, maybe they don't like the exact same music I do, and maybe we don't have the same politics, but a dad could publicly bare his soul and say, sometimes I just don't know if I'm even doing the right fucking thing at all. And barring a few exceptions, it is the internet. I've been there before. There's always going to be somebody that's unproductive and unconstructive. But 99%, even on the worst PRD post and the worst PRD comment, it's nothing but love and support and connection. And through those first, from March to, let's say, June 2020, that was crazy. Just for any human throughout the history of humans, it's a rather unique experience what happened. And we can't, most of us do discount it, because then if you don't, you're just going back and thinking, geez, wasn't that the craziest fucking thing that's ever happened in my life? I wasn't allowed out of the house for 30 fucking days. When? Wow. And then you find all these awesome people. I have we're 3 of us have a show, and we couldn't be further apart, right? Like physically.
Yeah.
I'm crawling up the Rocky Mountains, and they're in the Atlantic Ocean. I mean, that's
bizarre. We're not that close. We're landlocked.
Take 4 hours to get there.
The Chesapeake Bay doesn't count.
A part of your state touches the ocean. 0 parts of Alberta.
Not the ocean, it's a bay. I win.
Wow. You silenced him.
Once it hits that Chesapeake Bay, it's magically fresh water.
I didn't say that. It's salt water for sure, but you don't see people surfing in the Chesapeake Bay.
No, you don't.
Because it's not the ocean.
People don't swim there at all?
No, because it's all shipping.
Oh.
Yeah. Like shipping in a stretch of road.
Pretty much. There's a bridge.
You can stop and take a picture where you're surrounded by water, and that's about it. But you can be like, here I am at the Chesapeake Bay.
Pretty much it.
All I know about Chesapeake Bay, I learned from Hamilton. That's it.
How do we get on the Chesapeake Bay?
Actually say the word in the song, not even lying.
I believe it.
And if I had listened to it just 3 more times today, I might have had those lyrics memorized for you, but I don't.
But yeah, no. PRD, like I got there around July 2020, like, and I didn't know I needed it, but I needed needed it. I was in a pretty dark spot. Like, it was bad. And like, I just started posting shit, like whatever record I was listening to that day, or, you know, if I woke up, you know, just having a hard day, and I could just post whatever I needed to and get answers that I wanted. Or if I just wanted to share some memes, which, as these guys can tell you, it's what we do.
Yeah. So what we do.
Like, and now it's like, I'm as far from that dark spot as I've ever been in my entire life. And it's because
congratulations.
Of these guys, you know what I mean? Like, and I should still be there, but I'm not.
Yeah. And for me, it's the whole experience. I'm not young anymore, but at 42, I feel the best that I've felt in my whole life. And there's a lot of things coming into that. It's not just punk rock dads, but I'll tell you what, if I'd stayed in that toxic headspace I was in beforehand, this would have been further in the future, I think. Yeah. And it would have been a lot more work. And I think it might have been hard on me, I think, or harder. And, you know, I've gone on that group and said, I don't think I've been half as vulnerable as some people have. Some people, on the back, they're willing to wear them.
Yeah, they bear it all. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, the other part of it is I love to listen, and I'm not like a new age crystal reading Reiki practice an empath, but I do feel empathy. And so being able to, someone says, you know, I just want someone to listen to me talk. I don't want advice. I don't want to be told I'm right or I'm wrong. I want to yell and scream, hey, guess what? That's my wheelhouse. I'm all about that. And if, you know, you just bring one person from the shadow, you know, just maybe you save them a fight at home. Maybe you save them thinking a bad thought, but you've changed the day just the one time.
Yeah.
It's huge, right?
Yeah.
That ripples all over their community. And then when it comes back, that ripples throughout mine. And it's a big deal.
Yep. Yeah, there's days, like, there's weird days in PRD. Like, you get on Facebook and you're just like, what the fuck is going on? Like, and then you start talking to, you know, I'll message Matt or Craig.
Yeah, like, you have like
you guys have any idea what's happening? Like,
legit shorts went over my head for a very long time, and so what is this about?
There's no point.
There is no point.
That's the answer.
The greatest part about it. Legit shorts.
And you know, we've gone through different phases, but like,
oh my god,
the people questioning the Avril stuff, the rage quits. I mean, just, you know, we go through phases.
The dad bod calendar, all that.
Yeah. And then you got the stuff where it's like people reaching out for whether it's advice or if they just want to vent, you know.
And then you get the stuff you get to make fun of, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
the ones you're not quite sure if they're trolls.
Yeah.
And you're just like, do I comment here? Like, do I comment with rage or humor? Which one do I do?
I've learned to attack in GIFs now. It keeps me out of trouble.
Yeah.
So I just find the right GIF.
It's usually Sophia from Golden Girls going.
By the end of it, yeah.
But no, we have a lot of fun in that group. Yeah, that and Vibecat.
Vibecat is a better trademark, though. I love Vibecat.
Yeah, he just dances at everything.
If we were looking for completely unrelated sequiturs, Michael, what did you find in publishing in general terms? What was, I guess, the most challenging and the most fun part of self-publishing?
So the first book, Oy Oy Gevalt, might as well hold up the cover again. That's what I'm doing here. By an academic publisher called ABC Clio. And that came about because I got very lucky. Somebody I used to work with was working there, and she was my editor, and I had the connection. So that was a very different experience. But since this book came out in 2016, I've actually self-published 3 books. So Punk Rock Hora came out in January 2019. Then unrelated to the punk stuff, but Heir to the Throne, a poetry chapbook about air guitar, came out January 2020, and Celtic Punk Superfan just this month, all Kindle Direct Publishing through Amazon. So rewarding and challenges. So what was rewarding was, in a punk sense, not having anyone tell me what to do. I had a great relationship with my editor on the first book, but I was tailoring the book to be what that publisher would publish. I don't think that my first thought for a punk book would have been academic market, but that's just the way the book came out because that's what they did. And that was the opportunity I had, and no regret. I'm glad I did it, but it was a very different experience. For the self-published books, it really meant, figuring out the scope and the editorial direction all for myself. And, I work as an editor and, work with authors all the time. So that's kind of what I do, and that experience and those skills, but applying that to yourself is challenging. So, for example, for the first two self-published books, I worked with a cover designer and I was giving direction, whereas books I work on at my job, we have an in-house cover designer, and it's a very different process. I'm not the one telling them what to do. For the poetry chapbook about air guitar, I hired a friend as a freelance editor, and I'd like to think I'm a decent editor, but it helps to have a fresh set of eyes from someone also knowing what knows what they're talking about. And in her case, was a total outsider to air guitar. Great with rhymes through her own songwriting, no background in poetry. Great with humor, no background in air guitar. Great with music, but not really like that. It's a lot of metal that comes up in air guitar. So she was just connected enough to have a great feel for it, but not an insider to any of those worlds, which was a good thing. And just seeking out help when you need it, but also if you're not going to be making a ton of money off these books, which I'm not, not going way under with your budget. That's always a challenge. But, also saying if these are passion projects and hobbies, it's not about the money. I don't want to lose a ton of money, but I don't want to have only money guide me on how I'm doing this. But I think what I found rewarding was just being in my own head and doing that research, whether it's interviewing bands and going to the library. I'm addicted to the library. My family jokes that they're worse addictions, so, it's okay. But I'm addicted to the library.
That's what I say about my record collection.
There you go. Agreed.
There's worse habits.
Exactly. But for most, those going to a library or interviewing people over the phone or in person or even on Zoom, whatever, you're connecting with other people and going outside. But the vast majority of the time that I'm writing, I'm stuck in my head, for better or for worse. And it's not always a good place to be, but I'd say it's creatively fulfilling. And, I've identified as a writer with some gaps in between, basically since I was a little kid. I always thought that's what I wanted to do. Now I edit other people's writing, which is, the other side of the same coin. I didn't go too far. Just being in your own head and trying to figure out, how do I want to do this? Knowing when to ask for help, knowing, whom to contact, not just as a freelance editor or designer, but also, whom am I going to reach out to for research and interviewing? I mentioned in another context before, I cast a wide net, and I don't expect that I'm going to get 100% of people to say yes to an interview request or whatever, or if I'm doing research, that I'm going to get every interlibrary loan request for an obscure book, let's say, but to cast a wide net and to just try. And, there's a quote on the back cover of my first book by the Jewish metal expert, good comrade to have here, that says, my research is indefatigable, meaning, I don't get fatigued. That was a great compliment. But at the same time, when you're doing multiple books over a long period of time, to say that you can't get fatigued and you can't, you just got to go cast a huge net and do everything, go. That pace is not sustainable over a long period of time.
Right.
pacing yourself and not biting off more than you can chew is also important. You know, we were talking before, I mentioned that just today somebody said, and I took it as a great compliment, I really did, with Celtic Punk Superfan, which is a 48-page chapbook, not a full-length book, that he would have wanted to read more. And, you know, hypothetically, could I have written a longer book and, you know, probably gotten connections to those bands if I kept trying, like Dropkicks and Flogging Molly, and made inroads with their managers and done extensive phone interviews? I probably could have, but I don't think it would have been good for me in a, you know, not biting off more than you could chew sense, in terms of knowing how much free time I have to work on creative projects, you know, the demands of my job and my family life are, liking to get some sleep. You know, some people like to say I don't sleep. Good for them. I like sleep. I'm not going to deny.
I'm not that guy.
I need it. So
I need my sleep.
so pacing yourself, knowing, you know, how to define the editorial vision and scope, all that are important considerations. A lot of it also is, you know, every project is different. You know, with the Jewish punk stuff, it's my story at some level, especially Punk Rock Hora, the self-published Jewish punk book. Whereas the first book was an academic book. This largely tells my story, but as a collection of writing I've done through the years, plus an introduction that really tells my story. It's my story. I'm the common thread, but like, I don't choose what these bands put in their lyrics. I don't choose what they say on stage. I'm connecting the dots. So it's interesting when you're doing these kind of hybrid, like research, writing about other people, somewhat objective books with a huge personal narrative that's subjective, trying to combine it. That's why I self-published. Like, I did this book, you know, it got picked up by hundreds of libraries, and it went into multiple printings, and there was talk about a second edition, which I'm not sure that's ever going to happen, and that's besides the point. And I'm really proud of how you know, what I accomplished with the academic book that was picked up by a major publisher, not a major publisher, but a legitimate scholarly publisher. With these, I kind of just wanted to do it my own way, and I don't think I would have found for these. I mean, maybe a poetry chapbook, I could have kept trying and eventually found a home for it. But I wasn't trying to do something that conformed. There's a dirty word in punk rock. So that conformed to what a publisher would want. I wanted to just do it myself. And I'm not saying that necessarily is a bad thing. I work in publishing. I understand that in order to appeal to a large audience and sell books, sometimes things have to be a certain way and have sometimes a more linear narrative than I did in Punk Rock Hora. But I feel like I had already done that with the first project, and then I was just going to do it myself. So, you know, I said that this book was part punk rock hodgepodge, part zine, part memoir, part collection of articles, and it was all of the above. And if I were writing a book about Jewish punk for the first time and had my druthers, and it wasn't about what this publisher wanted or what this publisher wanted, I wouldn't have written this book. I wouldn't have written this book. I probably would have written some combination of the two.
Right.
But because I had written this one first, it allowed me to say, okay, now I'm going to tell my story and do all the stuff I didn't get to talk about in the first one. Not because I was censored, not because anybody told me I couldn't, but it just didn't really fit into what the editorial vision was and what I was putting into it myself. So in a nutshell, you know, I think of people who writing is an art, you know, and there are people who write books that are on the bestseller list, and that's great. And there are people who make music that sells a lot of copies, and that's great. And painters that, you know, make a career out of that and, you know, don't have other jobs. And there are people who are writers and musicians and painters who do it as art, who do it as a hobby, who do it primarily for themselves because they find something fulfilling both in the putting it together and then, frankly, to get to do this, to have a reason to come on here and talk to you guys and have something to talk about is part of the journey as well. And I love doing these kinds of things. So thank you again for having me on.
Sure.
I'm not, this isn't quit your day job money that I'm making off
the
books. It's nowhere near it.
No, like you said, though, it's
I want to quit my day job. I like my job, but the point is I'm doing this for me, not to make money out of it. And And that's what it is. And at this point, at least, you know, maybe I had higher hopes the first time I did a self-published book, not that it would make huge bucks, but that it would sell more than it did. But at this point, I've been doing it long enough where, you know, I've done 3 now where I'm pretty clear about this isn't going to sell huge, but if I could reach, you know, dozens or hundreds of people who care about the topic and enjoy it, that's okay. It doesn't need to be thousands. It doesn't need to, you know, be something huge. If it could just be a little bit for some people, then at this point, it's worthwhile.
It is. And this is my attachment to people writing, especially the way you're writing, whether it's an interest connection with the music or the religious connection with the Jewish part or ethnic with Celtic. But when you write and you put it out there and it's there forever, it's got an ISBN number and everything, it then becomes a peephole 50 years from now, 100 years from now, 200 years from now, back to the experience of Michael Croland on Long Island and what he thought, or what a larger group of people thought, or what was happening. And the idea that maybe this is just the history nerd in me, but the idea that one day I'm going to be a primary source blows my mind. And that's why, like, for the self-publishing thing, not only are you a primary source, but now you are a self-published primary source, and that tickles me. I love that idea. I think that's amazing.
And you know, the academic book has been cited. It absolutely has. But, you know, I think if somebody had published the full-length book about Celtic punk that I would love to read, I would not have done this book. But nobody had. So this is a statement by somebody who isn't the leading expert on Celtic music, but knows what he's talking about and knows it enough to do it. Has enough standing to do it. Not much more than that. Just enough to be able to honestly call myself a super fan, not the leading expert, and say, nobody's done this before. I've been following this for 2 decades. Here's what Celtic punk is about. Would somebody else do a better job? Please do, and I will gladly read your book. No animosity, no competition. I'd love to read that book. I tried to publish that book at my last job. It didn't happen. So this is me doing me.
Yeah. Now, what got you into writing? Like, or are there any writers that inspired you?
I mean, I always had this romantic idea about it. There, you know, when I was in like kindergarten, I remember, or maybe it was first grade, like, you know, draw what you want to be. And I remember and you had to write it underneath too. So I couldn't spell author, but I remember thinking author. I put fireman because I could spell that, but you know, but I wanted to be an author then. You know, my mom was a reading teacher. She taught remedial reading, and, you know, just reading and learning reading and writing skills were very big, and not just what I learned in school, but like supplementing that at home. You know, as a parent now, you realize, you know, just the impact that your parents had on you as a kid. And no doubt that was big. As some of my favorite writers are George Orwell, Isaac Bashevis Singer, Jonathan Troper, who's the only one of those 3 who's alive. But George Orwell's 1984, I've read it 4 times, and I read it for the first time as a teenager.
Not an instruction manual, U.S. government.
Exactly. You know, when I was getting into punk rock as a teenager, and just this whole worldview of, you know, the negative potential of government of humankind, and seeing that for myself, that book was a great way of framing it. Yes, unfortunately, joking or not, I would agree that far too much of it rings true in the years since I first read it. And, you know, if you thought that was true, you know, during the Iraq War and George W. Bush was the worst president I could possibly imagine then, and you get to the Trump era and it's like, oh, I thought that was bad. But, you know, that's
Bush any day.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Bush, I mean, I disagree with him, but, you know, he seems like
he wouldn't do bad.
In retrospect, it could have been worse. It could have
been far worse.
But he was the same kind of president that you could hate any other time. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't matter politically, party, or anything like that. He was just an average president you could dislike. Trump was something on another level because he was like...
Exactly.
Boy, did he kick that door down.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
43 was the least unlikable.
Hold my beer. Hold my beer. Watch this.
Exactly. Exactly. But
now, I have
tend
another...
to...
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No.
Is nonfiction, especially about music. Because a lot of what I'm researching tends to dominate what I'm reading. And when I'm reading fiction, I tend to like lighthearted, comedic things that allow me to just, escape reality and have a good laugh and, escape. That's why I'm reading it, to have a good time. I don't want, horror fiction. I don't want, anything that's going to make me think too much if it's fiction. If I'm reading fiction, I just want to just enjoy it.
Yeah.
No, for sure.
Reading a book about, a nice lighthearted book by Shalom Auslander about cannibalism. Some nice, I guess cannibalism isn't,
nice lighthearted topic,
reading. Light reading. No, but it's comedic and it's hysterical. And it's very well done. Absurdity is something I flock to.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I love a good absurd story. Something that takes it everywhere. Now, you wrote a book. You wrote the book about air guitar, and we haven't talked about it. But you're a competitive air guitarist.
Retired competitive air guitarist.
Retired. Okay.
My glory days are behind me. Yes. In 2005 was the first time I competed in New York at BB King. So there's my claim to fame as an artist there. I got booed off the stage, but people were literally throwing beer bottles at me. But hey, I could.
Was there chicken wire like in the Blues Brothers?
What's that?
Was there chicken wire like in the Blues Brothers?
No, but fast forwarding, I did a competition in Asheville, North Carolina, where at least I made it to the second round that time, and then I did some in Norfolk, Virginia, where one guy who ended up winning the competition came on stage and did a choreographed Blues Brothers routine with his identical twin brother, which is against the rules. You're not allowed to have anyone on stage with you performing, but this was an officially affiliated competition with Air Guitar, the governing body of air guitar.
Technicality.
They just let it slide because people enjoyed it, so I lost. I never won a competition. That was probably the one where I had the best chance. What was that?
Justice for Michael Croland.
Yeah, I know, right? Or Crowbar. That was my stage name as an air guitarist. Crowbar. Yeah. No W in Crowbar. Capital C-R-O, capital B-A-R, all one word. Get it right. So that's another one where I never had much success, but I had a lot of fun with it, and I just stayed in the world and kept going to the competition. Air guitar narrative is a guy named Aristotle, who has now won the Air Guitar World Championships in Finland twice, and U.S. Air Guitar Championships 4 times. A talent like no other. And I mentioned absurdity. I really play it up to the extreme. I started writing a lot of silly poems. I mentioned also there's a poem about Celtic Punk in the appendix of Celtic Punk Superfan, but I started writing a lot of silly poems in that style around 2014, I guess it was, when I was on the subway commuting to work and just looking to pass the time. Sometimes I would read, and sometimes I would send my friend Eric just these really silly poems about random topics, but a lot of them were air guitar because we had that common interest. And I wrote a lot of poems about Aristotle and, and other things air guitar related. And eventually I'm like, there's enough of a story arc here and a narrative, and I'm pretty proud of this if I could really edit it, that I could put it all together. And there was a memoir about air guitar. There's some joke books about air guitar, but there had never been a poetry book about air guitar. It was again, my
innovator,
my stamp. What's that?
You're an innovator.
Groundbreaker. Innovator, absolutely. It was my way to put my own stamp on. It's not a genre of music like different subgenres of punk rock are, but on a type of music that has a limited following that I was very passionate about and had been following for years, and a way of saying, all right, it doesn't get a lot of attention, but I'm going to, give to it.
And on the bright side, the volume of your air guitar probably doesn't bother your wife at all.
Thankfully, yeah. And my favorite song, right? My favorite song that I sing from her perspective is what we call the Song of Silence. So yeah, totally same vibe there. I love you, Tamara, if you're listening to this. And I admit that I can play our child's xylophone rather obnoxiously. I'm not denying it.
You just get it.
Not to mention the toy accordion and pretty much any.
Jesus.
Yeah.
You bring up the accordion. I've already forgotten who they were getting to play him, but they are doing a Weird Al Yankovic biopic.
Daniel Radcliffe.
Daniel Radcliffe. Yeah. Harry Potter.
Daniel Radcliffe, yeah.
Harry Potter, yep.
And
I'm thoroughly intrigued.
He's a guy that's been around forever.
Yep.
Okay, so tangent here. You were talking about Lin-Manuel Miranda and Hamilton before. The only time I've ever seen Weird Al live at Radio City Music Hall, a very prestigious New York venue. He was doing, what is this song? Yoda in the encore. And Lin-Manuel is a huge Weird Al fan. And said some amazing things crediting Weird Al for his own, how he put two and two together as a developed musical talent and songwriter himself. But out of nowhere, it's like, all right, the Weird Al turns to the audience. All right, now you guys sing this first. And, everybody's saying Yoda, yo, 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 Yoda. And then he says, and now Lin-Manuel. And out of nowhere, Lin-Manuel comes out from backstage and starts singing Yoda. And everybody just goes nuts. And Hamilton on Broadway. I've listened to the soundtrack a bunch of times. I watched it on Disney Plus. I respect Lin-Manuel Miranda, and I'm a fan of it, but I'm not a super fan, to use a term that we've used a few times tonight. But that was pretty cool. Now Lin-Manuel, Lin-Manuel he was talking about.
What I tell people who are not into musicals and who will not suffer me speaking about Hamilton is, if you want to go get the entire experience in as little time as possible, go listen to Weird Al Yankovic Hamilton Polka. It is
in 5 minutes, yes.
Get the whole thing in 5 minutes and it's wonderful.
You get the whole story. And quite honestly, Weird Al he checks every Weird Al box.
It's definitely a Weird Al song.
Makes fun of a character. It hits everything. And I mean, it's Weird Al. It's brilliant.
Yep. Weird Al is I like to talk about how much of a genius that man is.
Yeah.
My first cassette was Bad Hair Day.
Yeah.
So I love that guy. And it just blows my mind that he's in his 60s.
Looks good.
Yeah.
Looks great. He's my mom's age, man. That's insane to think about.
Well, and if they order here soon, because it's back and forth on our, he's doing a big world tour, and I would love to be here for that, because I'd go all day.
Yep, he's playing a couple of spots in PA that I'm trying to hit, both of them.
Yeah.
So.
Nice.
But
it's one of those, not a once in a lifetime guy, but if you live your whole life without seeing him, you're like,
yeah, I've already done that with Black Sabbath. I can't do that with Weird Al. You know what I mean? I have to see Weird Al.
I
saw Guar before.
But it's not the same thing.
Did you just say Guar?
Broders passed away, so I was like,
did
okay,
too.
cool.
Yeah. And also, in the same vein, I'm not particularly a Guar fan. I'm just I gotta experience this one.
The show is something.
I liked him so much. I enjoy his.
I love Weird Al.
I'm not a huge fan. I gotta go one way with Metallica. would gladly see Hamilton in the same vein again, if not for the pandemic and tickets being through the roof.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
You know, there's a lot of people that like aren't something I'm a super fan for, but you know,
it's an experience.
Level.
Exactly. I got to see BB King before he passed away.
Nice.
So I count. That's another one I bought.
I played BB King's. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, it was just one of those things. I was like, oh, BB King's playing at Penn State. I'm buying tickets.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'm a guitar player. Best that's ever lived. I'm going to go see this motherfucker.
Yeah.
And he killed it. Just something about it. I don't know.
I gotta tell you, for a long time, a lot of bands on my list that were in. I gotta see them once. Bad Religion. I don't know who's left on this list. That's a good thing. I feel like I've seen pretty much all.
Dropkick Murphys for me. I've never.
Well, obviously I've seen them a lot. Go, please treat.
As soon as I have the chance, I'm taking it.
Yeah,
I can't miss another opportunity to see them.
It's a fun show. It really is. Obviously, I'm biased. You know that by this point.
But I am too. I love them. So you're good.
You know, James, just like you, like James is a huge DKM fan.
Yeah.
I messaged Ken Casey like almost a year ago now. And I didn't think anything of it. I was just like, you know, thanks for all the music and all that shit. I've been a big fan since I was in like 6th grade. And like, he messaged me back like 2 days later and I almost fainted.
Nice.
Like, I was like, what? Yeah.
They're cool guys. You know, like I was saying my Fat Mike story before. And look, I get it. Things happen. They didn't know who I was. They didn't care. It is what it is. But like, yeah, Dropkick Murphys, I feel like they're good guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he messaged me back. He was like, hey, yeah, thanks for, you know, letting us know about all that and everything like that. And he was like, God bless you. Have a great day. And I was like,
awesome.
I got starstruck and I didn't even really talk to the guy. You know?
I think that's been the one thing about social media that I've enjoyed. I mean, musical artists, when they reply or when you comment on something on their fan page and they're like, yeah, thanks, or anything, it's amazing. That moment is when I'm on a author's, like a fantasy author's page. I'm like, thanks for the world of Athos, Mr. Troy Digg, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, screenshot, I'm going to show everyone this.
Nobody's going to know who the fuck you are, but hey.
Yeah, I really mixed experiences with like in person, like positive. So just two very different experiences, and not punk. But like Jonathan Roper, I mentioned him. My 3 favorite writers is the only one who's actually alive, and he wrote Where I Leave You, which was made into a movie, and some other very funny and well done books. And I won't get into the whole story, but there was a reason why that book was meaningful to me around the time my dad passed away. And I at a decade ago, and I went up to him and I told him heartfelt story. It meant so much to me, and he wasn't rude or anything, but he's like, "Oh, okay, thank you for sharing." You know, like not rude, not dismissive, not like "That's nice, get lost, kid." Like nothing like that, but just like,
underwhelming.
It was just like, okay, next. He didn't say that,
yeah,
but it didn't really mean anything.
It felt like that.
Yeah, and then the other one is Natalie Portman. So I used to run a Jewish vegan blog. I was the world's most famous Jewish vegan. So a journalist who just happened to have a huge crush on her to try to interview her. So I went to Annaby or 2 different events, public events that she was doing that had got in as a member of the press because it was before my blog, and I asked her a question both times, but the first time she didn't really give me a great soundbite. So I reworded the question so slightly the second time, like 8 months later. She said, first of all, the blog name was Heeb and Vegan, and I introduced myself and I say that, And she that name, man. And, like, I had trouble. Oh, that means a lot. Thank you. And then I continue, to ask my question, which is just basically a rephrased version of the same asked 8 months ago. And she's like, I think I've been asked this question in another Q&A, but I'm happy to answer again. I'm thinking like, she remembers me. This is yeah. And then she gave me a pretty good answer about how she does connect her Jewish faith with her. So there you go, mission accomplished. But
there you go.
Very different experiences. It's about the individual. But that, we were talking about the concept of it was really the time where I was not just like trouble regaining my speech at that point. I love that name, man.
My in-person moments are rather contrived by comparison because you're doing it over the course of work. And when I do it 9,000 times out of 9,001, it's because I've gone to a convention and was there. But one of the first big ones I went to in Calgary, it was Devil came out and I was head over and didn't get Charlie Cox or any an off. And I waited in line. It was right after knee surgery. And my wife says, if you do get up there to talk to her, you tell her that I said amazingly beautiful. Because she was like on television at all. It's like, wow. And it took me like 30 seconds. Like, oh my God, you were in Kids. And like, what? Oh, right. My wife told me to tell you that you're the most beautiful woman on the planet Earth. That's my favorite story because since then I've been fine. I've, met some other ones and it's a little easier for me to speak.
You met Superman.
Yeah. And
Brandon Ryan.
Nice.
Yeah, you met Carl Weathers. Oof.
Well,
Dylan, you son of a bitch.
And one of the companions from Doctor Who, that's my favorite one.
Nice.
But I mean, it's different if you run into somebody in public or you're for your job. That's amazing. That'd be so much more fun.
Right.
Oh yeah.
I mean, conventions are great, but it's Doritos and farts, so it's not that fun. A much more organic meeting is great.
Yeah.
Even doing it this way, like for me, doing it this way, like gets me a little more starstruck because at least at like a show, I can watch them do the energy to be like, yeah, you guys were amazing, like if they're just hanging out in their merch area. Then because there was a venue here that you could do that, the band would play and then they would just chill out in the lobby where their merch table was and you could just both with them or whatever.
Yeah.
I had a much easier time during those days now because I'm not watching them and then talking to them. I guess it's weird. I don't know.
Right.
But it is fun once.
But I have totally dropped the ball here, Michael. We were only supposed to have you for an hour. Over 2, yeah. So,
but it's been
amazing. But before we bounce on you, why don't you tell us where we could find your books?
Sure. All 4 of my books are available on Amazon, and that's the easiest way to get them, especially the 3 self-published ones. So again, it's Oy Oy Gevalt, Jews. Punk Rock Hora, Adventures in Jew Punk Land, Heir to the Throne, a poetry chapbook about air guitar.
All right.
Punk Superfan, Recaps and Reflections chapbook, 2002 to 2022. So much. This has been a blast. I had a feeling it would be. It's been great. And one cool thing about publishing multiple books is being able to put them in conversation with each other. Like, obviously, mind, they were part of the same journey. Like I didn't get into Jewish punk except because I had already had that Celtic punk interest. One led me to the other. So
yeah.
But I have this one out, being able to talk about it all together, it kind of just, it comes full circle. There's a Pennywise reference for you.
I dig it.
And on that note, I think we can end that. Thank you so much, dude.
Yeah,
Thank
dude.
you guys.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, this was awesome.
Cheers, boys.
Yep.
It's the masked road race set. The Rhino Rig and Venom Jackhammer are battling around the curves and down the straightaways with working headlights and laser cannons blasting away. A dual lap counter lets you know who's ahead. You're in command. Race head-to-head through the deadly squeeze track for real racing excitement. Meanwhile, the mighty Mask electric train set with Hurricane Chevy and Volcano van with launcher defend Boulder Hill. Nothing can stop the Mask train, where illusion is the ultimate weapon. Mask road race and train sets, each sold separately.
Power 1067 scores! Phantom Striker scores!
Interlocker scores.
Interlocker? What's that?
A new Lord Dread device.
I don't believe it.
Interlocker zeroes in on a TV target, fires invisible beams, and scores. And keeps score.
Or gets hit.
Interlocker scopes out the XT7. Scores.
Or be hit. The power of the future is in our hands.
We'll see.
Captain Power figures and vehicles sold separately.